Silver just printed a new record near $80 an ounce, after ripping more than 150% higher in 2025. And while the chart looks like a rocket, the real story is darker. The world is running this rally on the backs of men inside a mountain that's literally collapsing. No greetings, no fluff. This is what happened. AI demand hit the silver market like a power surge. Data centers need high-performance chips. Chips need circuit boards. Boards need silver. Transmission lines, switches, connectors, relays. Silver is the grease in the machine. And now supplies are tightening at the exact moment demand is acting like it has no speed limit. We're going to walk through the pipeline that feeds that demand, from one of the most famous silver mountains on Earth to the factories that turn raw rock into the components powering the AI boom. And by the time we're done, you'll understand why record price might be the smallest headline in this whole story. This is educational. We manage risk. 5 centuries. That's how long people have been digging into a single mountain in Bolivia, chasing shiny metal with stubborn hope and borrowed time. The mountain is an extinct volcano, hollowed out like a termite log. From the outside, it looks eternal. From the inside, it sounds like cracking bones. And here's the twist. Today, even in the place that once built empires, miners mostly aren't finding silver anymore. They're pulling up zinc, tin, lead, mixed ore. The silver is the ghost in the rock. Sometimes a trace, sometimes a rumor, often nothing at all. But the world still needs the metal as if nothing changed, as if the supply is infinite, as if a spreadsheet can manufacture atoms. Now watch this. At roughly 13,000 feet above sea level, the city below this mountain is one of the highest on the planet. The air is thin, the cold bites, the history is heavy. Back in the 1500s, this place became a fountain of wealth for the Spanish Empire. Today, it's one of the poorest corners of the region, with mining still acting like the main paycheck for tens of thousands of families. We need to sit with that for a second. Because the AI future we talk about in clean, glossy terms, servers, chips, automation, still depends on people walking into dark tunnels with chisels, hammers, and homemade courage. So how does that actually work in 2026? How do you pull future metal out of a dying mountain using techniques that would look familiar to a miner from 1700? It starts with a ride up to the entrance, a quick stop for supplies, and then a ritual that tells you everything about the risk. A miner steps off a bus near the mine mouth and buys 3 things like it's a checklist for survival. Cocoa leaves for energy, alcohol to steady nerves, dynamite to move the mountain when muscle can't. That's not poetic, that's logistics. Then the tunnel swallows him. Inside, the first stop isn't a machine, it's an offering, a small shrine, a figure locals call the uncle. Some historians say the original devil statues were planted by colonizers to frighten workers into obedience. Whatever the origin, the meaning now is simple. Down here, you respect forces you can't control. And down here, control is an illusion. The mountain is laced with something like 65 miles of tunnels. Some are active, many are abandoned. Some are safe for now. Some are traps, waiting for vibration. The rails in certain passages trace back centuries. The tools are still simple. The ore is still stubborn. And the ceiling is always negotiating with gravity. If you've never been underground in a hand-cut mine, picture this. The air tastes like dust and metal. Headlamps carve thin cones of light. The walls sweat. Sound doesn't travel normally. It collapses into muffled thuds. Every step is a bet. And this is where the supply chain gets uncomfortable. Because what leaves this mountain doesn't look like silver bars. It looks like sacks of broken rock, sometimes weighing up to 90 pounds, dragged to carts, pulled upward by a lift, then dumped into piles on the mountainside like the leftovers of an ancient feast. From there, the rock is sorted and sold to middlemen, buyers who represent foreign processors. Trucks haul the minerals out of a landlocked country to ports in neighboring nations. Then the cargo ships take over, and the real money starts far away, in refineries that squeeze value out of the rock with modern chemistry. Here's the part most people miss. If you export unrefined ore, you export your leverage. The ore can contain extra elements that become extremely valuable in the refining process. Tiny passengers in the rock that turn into big profit later. A classic example is indium, used in touchscreens and high-end tech. When it's treated like an impurity at the source, the country shipping the rock often doesn't get paid for the hidden value riding along. So we have a double squeeze. The world needs silver. The historic silver mountain is running out. And the countries doing the dangerous extraction can still get shorted on the value chain if they ship raw materials instead of refined product. Does that feel like a stable foundation for a global AI build-out? Or does it feel like a fuse? Now, let's talk about the physical act of mining, because this is where the story stops being abstract. A miner chips at a vein, maybe tin, dark and stubborn, hiding inside the rock like a bruise. If he wants larger pieces, he pushes deeper into corners that haven't been explored. And when the rock won't cooperate, he turns to dynamite. He packs the charge, lights it. Then he has seconds to move away, not a comfortable industrial safe distance, a hope this holds distance. The blast shakes the tunnel. Dust blooms, small rocks rain, the sound slams your chest. Then the scramble begins. Because mining here isn't a factory line, it's competition. Multiple crews, multiple claims, all trying to get to the next pocket first. That pressure creates a dangerous incentive. Push farther, faster, higher. And higher is the problem. Years of excavation near the peak have destabilized the mountain. Some experts describe it like Swiss cheese, so many holes that the structure starts to fail. Cave-ins become more common. The summit slowly sinks. The top is both the most dangerous and often the most tempting, because remaining mineral can still be concentrated up there. A decree was passed years ago to limit excavation above a certain altitude, but not everyone signed on. Some cooperatives kept digging. Because when your family's dinner depends on what you pull out today, long-term stability can sound like a luxury. Here's a question we need to ask ourselves, and I want you to actually answer it in the comments. If a technology boom needs more metal, who should carry the risk? The people underground or the people buying the chips? Now watch the trap. Small-scale mines like these can have fatality rates dramatically higher than industrial operations. Dust exposure can destroy lungs. A disease like silicosis can take a decade to develop and then steal years from the end of a life. Many miners don't reach 40. That's not a statistic. That's a countdown. So how do miners survive financially in this environment? Cooperatives. Instead of one company owning everything, groups of miners organize into cooperatives with membership fees and monthly dues. In return, members get a form of protection, access rights, some benefits, and a claim to whatever they find. That structure creates a lottery element. On a good day, a miner can make real money. On a bad month, he's grinding for scraps. And then there are the day laborers. They aren't members. They don't get benefits. They get a daily wage that can be as low as $10. They do the same dangerous work. They breathe the same dust. But their upside is capped. They're the leverage on the leverage. This is why a record price on a screen can feel disconnected from reality in a tunnel. Because spot price doesn't pay hospital bills if you're not the one holding the metal. Now, let's pull the camera back to the global picture, because this is where the AI narrative collides with geology. In 2025, silver didn't rise because people suddenly loved jewelry more. It rose because silver is industrial. It's electrical. It's the best conductor in the room, and every modern system keeps finding ways to use more of it. AI data centers are not just computers. They're power plants. They need massive energy intake. They need cooling. They need miles of cabling. They need switchgear. They need redundancy. And the more AI scales, the more the world builds the electrical plumbing to feed it. Silver sits in that plumbing like a critical gasket. So when price surges, the market is telling us something simple. Demand is acting structural, not fashionable. But here's where we have to be careful. A higher price doesn't magically create supply. It just reveals how tight supply already is. And the tightness shows up in places that don't make headlines. It shows up in a mountain that's been mined for 500 years where the silver is mostly gone, yet the world still assumes it will keep flowing. It shows up in a city where mining is still a major employer and poverty is still crushing, because the wealth extracted centuries ago didn't stay. It shows up in a supply chain where raw minerals leave the country, and the highest margin refining and byproduct extraction happens elsewhere. It shows up in the math of time. If it takes years to expand refining capacity, years to explore, years to permit, years to build safe industrial mines, and demand is rising now, then the stress doesn't disappear. It compounds. And compounding is what breaks systems. Now here's the contradiction that should make your eyebrows go up. The modern world sells you the AI future as frictionless. Cloud, automation, efficiency, but the metals underneath it are anything but frictionless. They're heavy, they're dangerous, they're slow to scale, they're constrained by physics and politics. So what happens when demand keeps rising, but the easy supply is already exhausted? We get what we're seeing now. Price breaks records, while the source of historic supply looks like it's running on fumes. And that leads to the next question. This one is about strategy, not sympathy. If the market is repricing silver because AI is pulling on it, where will we see the stress first? Will it show up as higher prices in electronics? Will it show up as shortages and delays? Will it show up as governments tightening resource policy? Or will it show up quietly in places like this mountain as people take bigger risks for smaller returns? We need to watch that. Because when a commodity becomes strategic, the rules change. The buyers stop acting like shoppers and start acting like survivalists. They sign contracts, they lock supply, they squeeze margins, they push risk downstream, and downstream is usually where workers live. Now, let's go back inside the mountain for one more uncomfortable detail. When miners blast and haul rock, they're not extracting clean silver, they're extracting probability. A sack of ore is a ticket. It might contain valuable metal. It might not. The miner can work all day and find mostly base metals, with silver only appearing in trace amounts. That means income is volatile. And volatile income creates desperate behavior. Desperation creates shortcuts. Shortcuts inside a collapsing mountain don't end with a slap on the wrist. They end with a cave-in. So, what's being done to stop the mountain from failing entirely? There are stabilization efforts, pumping cement into unstable zones, reinforcing sections, trying to keep the peak from crumbling. It's like repairing a cracked dam while the river keeps rising. And while that work happens, the mountain remains both a symbol and a threat. A World Heritage Site in danger, a national pride with a hollow core, a workplace that feeds families and takes lives. Now, if you're thinking, okay, this is tragic, but what does it mean for the silver story? Here's the meaning. This isn't a neat supply response environment. You can't just flip a switch and produce more silver from a depleted mountain. You can't ask a cooperative system to instantly become a modern industrial complex. You can't make safety improvements in a week. And you can't ignore the fact that the richest parts of the value chain often sit far from the mine mouth. So the record price isn't just a market event, it's a signal flare. It says the world is paying up for material that's getting harder to source safely, fairly, and consistently, right as technology demands more of it. And that's why the next few years could get weird. Because in commodities, weird is where volatility lives. And volatility is where most people get shaken out. Here's the mistake most people make. They stare at the chart and think the story is the chart. But the chart is just the scoreboard. The game is the supply chain. And the supply chain right now is a chain of stress points, aging deposits, dangerous extraction, unequal refining value, and a demand shock from AI. And if you want one more layer of tension, look at how silver behaves inside products. When silver sits in a tiny contact point, like a switch or connector, the manufacturer barely notices the price. A few cents here, a few cents there. But AI hardware is changing that mix. More servers mean more power distribution. More power distribution means more high current components. And in high current environments, you don't get to cheap out on conductivity without paying somewhere else. Heat, failure rates, downtime. Downtime is the monster nobody budgets for. A single hour of data center outage can cost more than 1 year of saving pennies on materials, so the demand becomes stubborn. Not emotional, not speculative, stubborn. And stubborn demand is what turns a tight market into a squeeze. That's why we need to read the silver move like a stress test. If price climbs and usage stays firm, that tells us silver isn't acting like a luxury, it's acting like infrastructure. If price climbs and companies redesign to use less, that tells us the metal is still optional. The problem is, a lot of this usage is not optional, it's physics. So here's a thinking question for us. What's the market really paying for? Growth in AI or safety in the grid that powers it? Because those are two different stories, and they pull demand in two different ways. Growth can slow, safety requirements rarely go backward. And somewhere in that difference is where the next surprise lives. If we're wrong, delivery times will expose it. So what do we do with this practically? We separate facts from interpretation. Fact: silver has surged and hit record highs around $80 an ounce in 2025. Fact: AI infrastructure uses silver across chips, boards, and electrical transmission. Fact: some historic silver sources are heavily depleted and physically unstable after centuries of mining. Interpretation: the market may be repricing silver from old money metal into future infrastructure metal, which tends to create longer, nastier cycles than most people expect. Possible risk: if supply tightens further, the world could see political and social pressure around mining regions, as well as stronger competition for refining and byproduct value. Likely, companies that depend on silver will try to secure supply in advance, which can amplify tightness. Now watch what happens next. When big buyers sense scarcity, they don't wait for the spot price to calm down. They lock contracts, they build inventory, they hoard. That behavior itself can tighten the market, like a crowd rushing one door because everyone heard the building is on fire. So if we want to understand where this goes, we shouldn't just watch the price. We should watch the behavior of buyers. Are they increasing stockpiles? Are they signing multi-year deals? Are they investing in processing capacity? Are they lobbying governments for critical mineral status? Because that's the path from commodity to strategic asset. And once a metal crosses that line, it stops trading like a simple widget. Now, we're going to end with a warning and a choice. The warning is simple. If the world keeps demanding more silver for AI and electrification while the supply chain remains fragile, this market won't move politely. It will lurch, it will fake you out, it will punish impatience. The choice is ours. Do we treat this as just another hype cycle, or do we recognize the human and physical constraints under the story? And here's the last open loop I want you to hold. If the most famous silver mountain on Earth is running out, where exactly is the next wave of supply supposed to come from? That question is where the next chapter begins. Drop your take in the comments. Are we watching a normal commodity rally or the early stage of a supply squeeze that forces the world to rewrite its plans? Before you go, hit subscribe, short and simple, so we stay ahead of the next move together.